Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Ancora, and I'm here to bring you captivating stories from some of the most fascinating people I've connected with on my own journey of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Wild Remedies podcast. Today, we are speaking with my friend, Nicole Gibson, and she has got to be one of the most inspiring human beings I have ever met. You guys are going to love this conversation. What is just so profound for me about Nicole is she has just achieved so much and has had such a powerful journey at such a young age. She is just a powerhouse entrepreneur, and we're going to dive into all of the details of how she got started with her business, Love Out Loud, and the health challenges and a lot of the adversity that she faced as a young woman, and how that really shaped her into the person that she is today with a huge mission that she has. Nicole is known as a multi-award winning social entrepreneur, but she prefers to be seen as an unstoppable messenger of love and human potential. She's listed as the Financial Review's top 100 most influential women, Pride of Australia Medalist and Finalist for the Young Australian of the Year. She's impacted millions of people worldwide in her unconventional models of community development and transformation. Currently, Nicole is the CEO of a global movement, Love Out Loud, engaging 4% of the global population to hit critical mass and shift humanity's baseline from fear to love. Love Out Loud is now focused on the development of technologies that can measure belief systems, rapidly being able to transform and direct human consciousness at scale. Okay, so that is really cool. We talk about that at the end of the podcast, so make sure you get all the way to the end and learn more about that project. It is so wildly fascinating. So essentially, what they're doing is using the principles of quantum physics and linking that into tech in order to help just change not only things on the planet, but also your state, which is just, oh my gosh, so exciting. So exciting. Okay, so let's jump into this and let's meet Nicole Gibson. You guys are going to absolutely love this episode. Nicole, welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I am so excited to see you again. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it has been like, my gosh, how long has it been since we chatted? Like a couple of years at least?
2.5, I reckon. Yeah, I was right at the beginning of all the madness. So I'd say maybe May 2020.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah. Totally different world back then. So naive.
Yeah, just everyone cast your mind back to 2019 and think about how distant that feels. It's crazy. It feels like 10 years ago, right?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, we've been through so much
Mhm.
since then. And
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of growth. Like how have you felt through all of this the past couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I really subscribe to the idea that part of the evolutionary process is sort of this refractory period where it kind of seems like we're going backwards, but actually that's just there as a leverage point so that we can accelerate forwards, sort of entropy before the rebirth. And I know on a micro level, for me, definitely, like I feel it's as we've all had a difficult time in our own ways. I think it's been really tough, but I feel so much stronger as a person, and I think like on a macro level, that's how we're going to come out of it too. We're going to be so much stronger, or at least that's what we need to be. That's what we need to be rooting for as an outcome for all that we've been through.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Actually, that's an interesting perspective. And I've mentioned this many times on the podcast about, individuals that go through a lot of adversity generally end up being very strong, resilient people, right? And this is kind of an opportunity for all of humanity to face something and to, hopefully come out stronger. I know a lot of people have gone through a lot of difficulties during this time. But it really is an opportunity for growth, isn't it?
Mm. Of course, and it's so common, I think, for people to see someone that's really strong and never to question um what's made them that way. Definitely my experience working with people, it's never it never just is, you know.
Mhm.
It's a result of having that be developed in some way. And usually, like, it's the polar, right? Someone that's gone through something that's made them completely vulnerable and fragile because they've been
Mhm.
taken to those places in order to survive, in order to get through it. They've had to cultivate enough strength to get them out of that really difficult time. So I know it's hard to sort of hold that awareness when you're going through it, but there's definitely, that's the gift. That's the gift in these experiences. And I think, like, how many people in the Western world prior to 2020 were saying things like, "Oh, I just wish the rat race would stop. You know, I wish society would change," or like, "There's something just not quite right about society." And then we go through something like this, and we can be so quick to be like, oh, I just want things to go back to normal, and not actually be inquisitive and curious, and take the opportunity to actually make the changes that I think collectively we were all asking for in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a huge shift in, like an exodus of people leaving the workforce, realizing like, hey, this isn't what I want to do anymore, right? We have more people starting to work for themselves and,
Mm.
looking for things that are more fulfilling because we've also gone through a period of, you know, I guess looking at one's mortality, and that will definitely make some shifts in a person's life.
For sure. Yeah, it's so true. I took some meetings last week in Sydney, so one of Australia's, biggest cities, and I was meeting the executives of a few different companies, and we're taking meetings in their office, and there was literally zero employees in the office, and it's just
Oh
normal
wow.
now. Not because
Yeah.
they've resigned, just because they're now sort of comfortable with working from home, and I think employers
Yeah.
are finding it really tough getting all of their employees back to work, and questioning whether or not that's even the goal anymore, which I
Mhm.
think is a great thing ultimately. Like, having time where you're together as a team, but having a day-to-day ecosystem economically that allows people to have more sovereignty, that's definitely, I think, a step in the right direction.
Yep. Absolutely. Is your
Mm.
team predominantly mobile?
Yeah, we're all over the place, and
Yeah.
what we're more and more trying to sort of cultivate culturally is having this time of deep togetherness, sort of
Yeah.
immersive times where we're really together, and we get on the same page, and we plan and we strategize, and then being able to spread our wings and not be not be stuck to any one location. But I mean, for me, and it's probably because I've never worked for anyone, so I didn't maybe have this dogma. I don't know. It never made sense that you would need to have everyone together to make sure that they were doing their work.
Mhm.
Every person should be measured against their true merit. If you're able to get the result, no matter where you are. In fact, I think a lot of people get better results when they're able to work in a cafe or sit on the beach. And why
Yep.
would you? It's very soul destroying to force someone to be in a cubicle. um, yeah, and just why? I guess it's
Yep.
this kind of like factory mindset coming out of the industrial revolution that hasn't been challenged until now, which is
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah. It is. It's wild. Oh my God. I remember like some of my first jobs. Well, one in particular, I used to work for a municipality, and it was like 9 to 5. Wasn't a cubicle. I mean, like for what it was, if it was going to be an office, it was okay. But it was just like, why? Like, I would just get so much more done at home if I didn't have to commute. All my snacks are there. It's just so much easier when I can just, make something quickly, eat it, get it done, and not just like force myself to be productive for whatever 8 hours, right? Because I don't know. I find for myself, like, I need to have breaks throughout the day and just have somebody watching you all the time and like making sure that you're clocking in and out and stuff. It's just like, that was just a complete fuck no for me from a very, very early age. I was like, that is absolutely not going to happen.
So it was truly one of my biggest fears, and probably why I was so driven to just make it work as an entrepreneur on a personal note. Like, it just
Yeah.
Also, time versus money never really made sense to me
Yeah.
because they're not comparative. One is literally um, so dispensable. You can make money in so many different ways, and time
Yeah.
you're never going to get back. So to have that mindset, I think is also very destroying on the human soul.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Speaking of being entrepreneurial, let's chat about Love Out Loud. I know you have an absolutely, oh man, it's just such an inspiring story. So let's just start with like your background, like how everything started. I know that you went through a lot of adversity in your younger years. So let's dig into that.
Sure. Yeah. Where would you like me to begin? Where it all started?
Where it all started. Yeah, I know there was some healing and things that needed to happen. And, we talk about how adversity, creating resilience. Maybe let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess the first thing in terms of resilience for me, what was really unique about my childhood was just the level of change that I was experiencing all the time. I went to so many different schools, almost a school a year in a way. But I left mainstream school at 14 to pursue performance. So I kind of had this PhD, that's what I like to call it, in change by the time I
Mhm.
become an adult. And what's really incredible about that is it showed me how few people, because I had, I guess, a comparative experience, how few people have ever learned to build a positive relationship with change. And then going into working as an entrepreneur in mental health and solving the subsequent problems that you see in mental health. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of that journey in just a little bit. But on change, what I really started to notice was people tend to, and statistically this is backed up, struggle the most and are most vulnerable during periods of transition and change. It's something like 90% of moderate to mild mental health challenges are triggered usually by some kind of life change that someone's not able to cope with, which makes sense, right? Whether that's the loss of a job, a breakup, maybe a death, maybe a health crisis, something that suddenly happens, or maybe it's not even sudden. Maybe it's just the inevitable thing that was always going to happen, but you were so in resistance to it because you didn't have the resource to relate to that change in a positive way. Um, Leads to the stress and the anxiety and sometimes depression, these other complications within the spectrum that is mental health. And I really see a huge part of the solution there, learning to be agile and nimble and accepting. Ultimately, acceptance is where you really do start to heal anything. So if you're in acceptance of what needs to be let go of, and you're welcoming of that new chapter, and you're not holding yourself in the resistance, which is where suffering's created, I think a lot of the pain we experience in life won't disappear, but it will certainly be minimized. So that was something my childhood forced me to get really good at, which I hated at the time, obviously, but
Yeah.
I had to accept very young, okay, change is this really inevitable part of life, and letting go is
Mhm.
this really inevitable part of life. And on the other side of that, when I relate it to my journey as an entrepreneur, it's allowed me to think so big, because I think part of what blocks us from being able to dream and vision in this really expansive way is on a subconscious level. We're already premeditating the things we're going to have to let go of. Like the human mind wants to focus on all the things we're potentially going to lose on that journey of fulfilling our dreams, which is really, there's this whole other way you can see it, this whole perspective shift that's available. But a lot of the time it's just not practiced. So I've really always had this curiosity. It's more than that. It's more like an obsession with helping people really understand the process of change, because there's a lot of it obviously that's unpredictable, but there's also things that are predictable. There's this cycle and this pattern of change, which when I teach Love Out Loud's work, I teach it as the process of a rite of passage, which is very similar to metamorphosis. The ending of an old identity, and then the liminal space where you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming, and then the integration into this new identity. And when you understand that this is the form change actually does take, the biggest shift, the biggest fundamental shift that happens there is usually when we go into that change and we're unconscious to the cycle of change, things will be falling away from our life because we can't hold on to them anymore. And we're thrown into that space of liminality, but we're not empowered to consciously direct that change. And so we're kind of at the mercy of, reacting to life. We lose a job, and we're so stressed out, and we don't know how to take control of that change. And maybe the first thing that comes along, because we're so afraid of being in that liminal space, that discomfort of, well, I'm identityless all of a sudden, maybe we take like the first offer that comes to us, which is really just like the energetic echo of what you were just in, which isn't actually really helping you grow, rather than relaxing, easing into that process, understanding that it's a natural cycle, and taking the time to be like, well, okay, something's falling away here because I'm being called into greater expansion. What do I really want? And it's in that space that you can't control anymore what's falling away, but you can direct where that leverage is going to take you. And that's where I think we can really find empowerment. We can have self-control and self-regulation and direction and conviction without needing to try and control the external all the time. Going to so many different schools and living in different countries as a kid, anyone that had similar experiences, you know that it's always sad to say goodbye to your friends, and when it happens a few times, you also realize, okay, I'm going to make new friends. It's not the end of the world. Like, the sun's still going to come up tomorrow. And so that to me is resilience, when you're no longer fighting reality, when you're in harmony with it. But I've really battled, talk about adversity. I didn't know how to cope with that when I was younger. Like, it wasn't, I was forced to learn how to, but that was through a lot of struggle. That was through going through a lot of suffering consistently and realizing I need to learn to do this differently. And I also just wasn't suited to the schooling environment, so all of it together was like a bit of a mess. And I was an artist at heart. I saw everything as art and poetry, and like just wanted to express myself. I didn't want to be sitting at a desk, learning maths. That wasn't really my vibe. So when I started to pursue that at 14, I was thrown into this amazing environment. Ultimately, it was an incredible environment where I got to pursue the thing that I loved, which was theatre every day. But what no one taught me at that age was you can have these amazing sort of opportunities, which I did. But if you don't have that relationship with yourself, if you haven't found that center and that love inside of yourself, you can't really turn those amazing opportunities into the outcomes you're wanting them to, because you're fighting yourself. And isn't that true for so many people?
Yeah.
Going back to the start of the conversation, how many of you guys said, I just want, change. I just want society to stop. And then it happened, and your mind goes straight to, well, I'm out of my comfort zone. I just want it to go back to normal. When is this going to end? And you have to learn to really go with it. And so that at that point in my life was my biggest initiation through that. But my mental health really, really suffered. And it was quite a, I don't know if it was a competitive environment or I just related to the environment competitively because I wanted to be the best, because I associated my worth with what I saw as being the best at my art school. I had these ideas about what that was, and strived so hard to my demise, which resulted in a life-threatening eating disorder. What's really interesting about going through an experience like that is it really is related to identity. It's so linked, and I think this is true to all mental health challenges in a way. When the identity starts to And even in our language, I am depressed, I am anorexic. There's a bias towards identification with those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to let it go, it's going to continue to grow vines, inside of you, which definitely is what happened to me. And it was really being in the experience of anorexia for the first, year or so. I really thought that I was in control of that
Mm-hmm.
um, eating disorder. And it wasn't until I really felt so helpless that I started to realize it had control of me. And although that experience specifically, not everyone has had, when I share my story, I encourage people to think about where that's relevant to them. How many situations have you found yourself in life where you really thought you had it under control, and when all is said and done, if you were to really be honest with yourself, you feel totally snowed under, and you don't know how to get out of a situation that ultimately um, isn't healthy for you, isn't the best thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much in that, though. I really learned how, as a society, we relate to pain, because as the illness got worse, obviously it showed, and that was also different to, I think, a lot of people that go through versions of mental health challenges that are less visible. It's not always, you're not seeing people's reaction. But for me, in that experience, I was seeing the way people related to it, because it would be the first thing on their face when I met them or when I was talking to them. When it started to get really critical and I couldn't hide it anymore. And in my recovery from that, it posed a lot of questions. I had a lot of curiosities in a general sense about society. Like, why are we so quick to resist and reject something when it makes us uncomfortable, especially when it represents vulnerability or it represents pain, and it, again, I think it stems from this really negative relationship with change a lot of the time, because we'd have to lean in and we'd have to open up, and it's unknown to us and it's uncomfortable. um, but really think about the impact that's having on our world, on our society at large, and even in our own life, when you can't open your heart to have those difficult conversations, when you can't sort of breathe into these experiences that will transform you and probably the other person because of your own internal contraction. What it's ultimately doing is limiting your life. It's limiting your ability to connect with others. It's limiting your ability to vision and dream. It's limiting your ability to make really difficult decisions. And I think if you want to have a truly expansive life, that's something that's inevitable that you're going to have to figure out how to do, make difficult decisions, because there's going to be plenty of them. Um, and all of that comes down to resilience. And I had a very deep insight into just how removed we are from being encouraged to do that on a societal level when I was basically the 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 point of projection of that, through the eating disorder. And interestingly, a big part of my healing was the shift of thinking from, no one's there for me and no one can lean in and help me, to, wow, it's that person's so unable to be with their own vulnerability that the only decision they can make when they're around pain is to reject it. And it's really just a projection of themselves, that they're in such a deep rejection of self. And for me, coming out of that experience, my capacity to be with people's humanity is really deep. It takes a lot for me to start to feel uncomfortable in any kind of emotion, whether it's deep grief or shame or anger. I've got a very deep ability to hold that. And that's because I've had to hold myself in that, so it's, I have, it's much easier to feel like people can come as they are. I don't need you to be any certain way. You can just be you. And from that place, very beautiful relationships can be developed. And yeah, learning to deal with the change process, and actually learn to love the change process and get excited for the change process. That's what it unlocks ultimately, which became a big part of the ethos of the work I went on to do as a entrepreneur.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is such a beautiful story. And there is so much to unpack there. I'm curious, do you still experience a lot of change in your life, or has that sort of settled down as you've gotten a little bit older?
Hi, I'm Maddie. Let me tell you a quick story of how I'm supporting my PCOS with Wild Remedies Spiced Chocolate Magic Latte. First of all, I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, so you know I'm investing in finding long-term, sustainable approaches to wellness. Living with PCOS, when things are feeling a little out of balance, it's common for me to wake up groggy, have blood sugar crashes throughout the day, or become totally overwhelmed by daily stressors. My morning coffee was causing blood sugar spikes, anxiety, and tummy trouble, so I swapped it for Wild Remedies Spiced Chocolate Magic Latte about a year ago. And believe me when I tell you that the change has been insane. Each sachet has 3 servings of wild Siberian chaga, a powerful antioxidant-rich adaptogenic mushroom that helps to fight inflammation and fatigue and regulate the immune system. It tastes like a creamy hot chocolate with just a hint of spice, and it keeps my stomach calm. Since swapping, I feel more clarity and calm throughout the day, and my morning magic latte helps to set clear intentions for the rest of my day. I save 15% on my monthly subscription at wildremedieshop.com, and at $2.50 per serving, it's saving me a ton on Starbucks runs and supplement orders. Check out the links and promos in the show notes to get your own. Your adrenals will thank you.
Well, at the moment, Love Out Loud's moved into tech, so I'm basically scaling a tech startup. So I'd say every day is a
lot of change.
a wild adventure, yeah. But and even this is a new level of challenge for me, and I'm having to adjust my comfortability with change. And it's not even, interestingly, as a leader, it's not even. I'm pretty comfortable with the change, but where I've been doing growth work is my ability to hold and deliver that level of change consistently to others. That's definitely that's a point of discomfort when, as a leader, sometimes I just wish I could be more consistent, but it's not actually the right thing for the business to keep going in a direction that's not working. And the easier I become about it, the better it is for the company, and actually the better it is for the team. So there's constant points of contraction that I'm having to face inside myself. But what I've learned to do is have routines, and points of consistency that no matter what's happening on the outside, there's something I can come home to. And that's been especially true this year, more than any other time in my life. I've developed that. I'm more serious about it than I've ever been, probably because of the level of change, that I'm dealing with every day. To not have that would make it very, very hard for me to cope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I'm really interested in what that routine looks like. And yeah, okay, so what this is kind of bringing me to right now is just even on my own journey right now. I'm noticing that I've always noticed that there's this big theme of like deep transformative events that happen in my life. And they're usually quite sudden and dramatic. And I always go back, like I like to dig into astrology and now looking more into the gene keys. And I have this, it's called the 40, the number 47, the gene key 47, which is quite predominant in my chart, which essentially talks about exactly what you were talking about. And so I'm just curious to see what your chart would look like and if that's in there as well. It's a challenging placement to have, but again, like you are always offered these opportunities to be faced with a lot of change and a lot of challenge in your life. And it's just part of your work in this incarnation to build that resiliency. And so it's really beautiful that you've done that and also recognize that at such a young age. I mean, like you have been winning awards and all kinds of things for your advocacy and your work at, like, oh my gosh, like, I made a note here, one of Australia's top 100 most influential women at the age of 21. Like, that is wild. That is wild. Like, how did all of that happen at such a young age?
I mean, there's so many ways that I can answer that question, right? But I think like to try and give the most helpful, simplest answer, and you actually alluded to it before, was through these experiences I had to face the reality of death, and because that was where the path I was on with anorexia, basically it took me to that crossroads. I had to make change, or that was the next, reality of that path that I was on, which is a very rare thing, I think, for any 16, 17-year-old to be faced with. How many 16 and 17-year-olds are thinking about death? It's a pretty uncommon experience, unless you've maybe had a health crisis yourself, or maybe you've experienced a death close to you. And all those people that I've ever met, they're all changed. You don't go through an experience like that unchanged. Yeah. So what that then forced me to do was basically, and I would encourage everyone to do this, even if you don't have a life event that's forcing you to. For me, I had to consciously choose life. A lot of us are just living. We're just living by default because our mum and dad chose to have sex, and here we are. Like, and maybe later in life, maybe at that point in the cadence of our sort of societal milestones that we lay out, we start to think, maybe I should give back, or maybe I'm going to have kids, and that's going to be my way of leaving a legacy in the world. My journey was very different. I had to choose that in order to save my life and to get out of these really toxic patterns of, ultimately, I sort of associate anorexia with addiction. I had to find strength to overcome that. And it was one of the hardest, things I've ever done to rehabilitate. It's not just mental. For me at that stage, I had to rehabilitate my body. I had to rehabilitate my mind. It did damage to me spiritually when you betray yourself like that consistently every day. It's a lot of healing that you've got to go through, to forgive. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself for allowing that level of self-punishment. So it's very deep work, and I think like that journey isn't talked about enough. So often you'll have someone that's gone through adversity, and then the next citation is, oh, and you became the most influential, top 100 most influential woman in Australia. But it's like, no, like, there was so, like, let's talk. I think the thing that's most relevant is the moments where I couldn't even think a day ahead. The frame of my thought was like, how am I going to get through the next minute of this anxiety? That's how narrow in moments my frame became. And I think that that's true strength. That the winning of an award or the success of a business is how you show up in those micro moments and the strength that you cultivate. And a lot of the time, by the way, and I think this is true for a lot of people, I didn't feel strong in those moments. I didn't feel like I was coping in those moments. I felt like the world was going to end. I felt like I was failing. But the fact that you endured it, that you felt all of those things that you felt that were so uncomfortable, that was so difficult, and you're still here, and you did find a way, even when your mind was telling you that you didn't do it in a way that was good enough, or, you could have handled it better, or this or that. You still got through it, and that's the true cultivation of strength. And I see those big wins really as enough of those small wins adding up to create that. Of course, it's incredible to be recognized for hard work, but you also can't make it about that. You've got to make it about defining your character. It's like when I step into a weight session or a yoga class, I intentionally don't think about, in 5 years' time, am I finally going to be able to do this pose, perfectly? I think like, what's my relationship to myself right now, and how can I connect even deeper and become even more deeply present, today than yesterday. And over time, of course, that's going to add up to greater success. um, but that's what really matters. And I've also been at times of fast paced, where there's been pressure and expectation in a business, as there always is, and I've lost sight of those moments. I've lost sight of what really matters, and that's a really empty path. And these are the stories of people that will have it all on paper, and how common is that story? But they don't actually have anything, because they've sacrificed the things that truly are important: presence, and growth, internally, and connection to self and the relationships around you, in the pursuit of something that's ultimately two-dimensional. When I won that award, that was coming off the back of a 2-year trip around Australia in my van, speaking in communities and schools. And that's the thing that really matters. How fucking shit scared I was as a teenager driving through the desert in Australia, some of the wildest, rawest desert. You're talking 30 hours before you get to the next roadhouse, carrying jerry cans in 50-degree heat. Like, I
Oh
was
my
so
God.
I was so scared. I was so scared, but I did it. And that to me is the true award. And the true award was meeting those edges of myself and still choosing to pursue my dreams regardless of how scared I was. Getting up and talking in front of kids, like, now that feels easy, but that was not easy. Especially like at the time, I was only a couple of years older than them. So in a way, they sort of felt like my peers, Um, and it's all those moments. It was the moment that I had like really, really bad. I was really, really badly sick. I had food poisoning, and I had an interview, one of the first interviews where the media had actually wanted to cover the story of the trip. And I was so sick, and I was living in a van, and it's like I was at the Macca's trying to like pull myself together before I had to present. So that's the reality of what I think everyone's story looks like on the way to success. And
Yeah.
as I move more and more into success, which I'm deeply grateful for, like, it's amazing to watch my company grow and to watch my team grow, and all of those things. Don't ever lose sight in this Instagram world of just how real those realities are for every person you're looking at, and you think they have something I want, or it looks so easy for them. If someone's making something look easy or simple, they've had to go through a lot of shit to refine it to a place that it seems that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's tough because that comparison can be really paralyzing for a lot of people. I know, even myself. It's like if I find myself doing it, I'm like, nope. Okay, we're turning this off. This is not reality. This is, it doesn't serve anyone. But it's really tough with social media and things these days. There's so much out there.
And it doesn't serve the person either. Like, sometimes that's a nice thing to remember, that when you see someone in that light, ultimately what you're doing is dehumanizing them. And it's also our responsibility to tell the truth. Like, we have
Mhm.
to be honest. I think, especially as a leader, I challenge leaders on this all the time. Like, if you're creating a bit of a deceptive image, these influencers that are always on
Mm,
yachts and jets and this and that. I hate that shit, because it's like,
yeah.
okay, sure, you can show your lifestyle, be proud of that, but be honest about, and for many of them, maybe it's that they had to cut a bunch of corners and that keeps them awake at night. Like, well, what is it?
Mm,
What's the truth behind that? Because you're selling that, and so if you're selling it, be honest about what that actually is. And
mhm.
yeah, like, I guess I've done a lot of facilitation in my life as well, and so I've held people in the humanity of their experiences, and that's been one of the biggest gifts of my work in that space. Is you truly see that nothing in life that's really worth it, is I don't want to say easy, because I think when you're on path and when things are aligned, it can come in this easeful, flowing way, and that's a sign of alignment. But there's still something that will always be asked of you, you know. And sometimes what's being asked of you is courage. Sometimes what is being asked of you is transparency, is strength, is determination, is will, is self control. Like, you're always going to have tests. And so don't think that anyone has anything without having needed to give something. And if they haven't given anything on the way, they will be forced to give something at some point. And that's usually, the demise of their creation, or some kind of big drama that happens in their life, and then, they have to pay their dues. We all ultimately have to reap what we sow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I am curious. I really like how, I don't know if the word is like, but when you were talking about the eating disorder and how you related that to self-betrayal, right? So like these consistent self-betrayals, I thought that was a really interesting way to frame that. And I'm curious, like, for anybody who is going through, let's say, like an addiction or a mental health crisis right now. And I mean, there's a lot of that happening, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are in a mental health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I found an interesting stat on your website. It was something like 85% of the Western world is dealing with loneliness every single day,
Yeah.
which is wild, right? And I'd love to dig into why you think that is happening. But first, I'm just wondering, like, what some tips you might have for folks who are just kind of going through it right now.
Yeah, these are big questions. It's because there's no one answer. Um, if I was to give a uniform answer, for me, it would be faith, because I think no matter what you're going through, um, in terms of challenges, if you're in a situation, and I would say if someone's been in sort of prolonged states of loneliness or mental health challenges, it's something that they're actively wanting to change. They wish it was different. And if you haven't yet been able to cultivate that change, you need to be able to draw on a strength. And in moments where it doesn't feel available to you, like when someone's dealing with depression, when I've been dealing with depression in my past, it just hasn't, everything has felt so hard,
Yeah.
like cooking a meal feels hard, let alone figuring out how to change your life. That's just totally overwhelming. So where do you get that strength from? And for me, I feel very blessed, because I've always felt connected to God. I've always felt connected to something bigger than me. That's, even in my darkest times, there's been something that's existed in me that I know is bigger than my pain, bigger than my limitation, bigger than my challenges. Even when I've felt, not able to embody that, I've had a faith that it's true and that it's existed. And the times where I have felt expansive and elated and everything in my life feels like it's going in divine order, I've had those experiences enough to know that there is an intelligence, at least this is what I believe, that's governing this experience. And from there, I can convince myself, okay, well, if there's a governing intelligence that is separate from nothing, including myself, that's equal in the sunset, um, and the baby and the trees as it is in me. I'm not separate from that. I'm from that miracle. I'm not separate from that perfection. And it's that thought that allows me to trust when I'm going through a bit more. Because I think depression sucks no matter what, but what makes it suck even more, and what makes loneliness suck even more than it does just by default, is fighting it. I think it's when you fight the depression, when you tell yourself you're wrong for being depressed, when you fight the loneliness and you tell yourself, I've failed every relationship and why can't I, find the love of my life, and do my friends hate me, and are my coworkers bitching about me, like whatever the thoughts are, when you're fighting it rather than just acknowledging it, which is ultimately what it wants. Your loneliness wants you to meet it with tenderness and to love yourself in that. Because if you can't heal that feeling of loneliness, and I say this from a deep place of understanding, like this is not sort of this arbitrary answer, like I really get what it feels like to be in those places. And you want anything but what I'm about to say to be true, because you want relief from it. But what it's really calling you to do, it's like Rumi, the cure for the pain is in the pain. It wants you to lean in, it wants you to be present, and it wants you to learn how to heal that without external stimulus first. So that when you start inviting things into your life, or life starts to sort of open up new doors so that you're not as lonely, or that you enter a period where your depression is lifting again, the way that you can be in that space is like deeply appreciative but totally unattached. And I think that's how we keep things alive in our life. It's when we learn to appreciate the flower instead of picking the flower, rather than strangling and holding the flower. When we have these times of deep introspection and we're feeling lonely, if we don't do that work in those times when life's put us in a position where we have to confront that, if we don't do that work, then we're going to come out of that cycle with the same tendency to attach, with the same tendency to be so afraid that we're going to lose the thing that we think saving us from that loneliness, that we grab onto it. But if we don't need saving from the loneliness because we know how to heal ourselves in that space, then when a soulmate does come along, or a new friendship group appears in your life, you relate to it in a way that's very different. You just appreciate the beauty and you allow it to be what it is, and it's a lot healthier and it's a lot more sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I've struggled a lot with depression in my life, and anxiety and all kinds of health issues, and so many circumstances that just felt like they were never going to end, right? But what I've learned is that, that the aspect of impermanence, like nothing does last forever. So even when you are in the deepest, darkest pit, like I remember just laying in bed and being like, I don't know when I'm going to get out. Like, is it a week from now? I don't know, and the anxiety starts to creep up, and then all of the self-hatred, and I should be able to pull myself out of this. And I've got to a point where I just had to learn to allow it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like fucking driving off a cliff today. Every bone in my body hurts and I can't get out of bed. And I guess I'm not answering emails today, as much anxiety as that would bring me as an entrepreneur, and feeling that I had to be responsible for all of these things, which, I do have a responsibility for things. If I just couldn't function, then I wouldn't function. And I just had to trust, like you mentioned, like that faith aspect, I think is so incredibly important, because if you don't have that, it makes everything so much more difficult. And I just knew that the process that I was going through was a lesson that I needed to go through in order to heal myself and to be able to help others at some point, right? Like I discovered, it took many, many years, but my depression was actually was caused by food, right? It was caused by gluten. And yeah, I mean, there were other things on top of that. I had gone through tumultuous, breakups and things like that would definitely, make me struggle with my mood. Also just, growing up, there were circumstances where it was more of a mood-based depression rather than, something that was changing the chemicals in my body because of what I was eating. But that was the lesson there, right? But I had to go through that process of suffering for many, many, many years to finally find the thing, and now be able to teach people about it. Because I feel like a lot of people are suffering with mental health, yes, because of the circumstances of society, but also because of all of the bullshit in our food, right? Like that's a huge part of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And everything
Mhm.
else, which is food, water, chemicals. It's
Oh God. It's
when you
just
start
an
to go down
assault
that road,
24/7. Yeah. Oh,
for sure, definitely.
yeah.
Mm.
So what do you do now to stay on the top of your game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really like a lot of the lessons we've been speaking through up until now are my strategy. I've really had to learn to not fight reality, and actually like if you have a lot of visionary minds that listen to this amazing podcast, maybe they can relate. Like, I think as a visionary, you do by default fight reality because you're looking at reality and you're like, I don't accept this. I have a vision. I have a vision of how
Yeah.
reality should be, and I didn't realize actually how much that was making me blind to facing what was really there. And it's not necessarily about okay, reality is this and that just is what it is, so I can never make change. No, it's like, this is truly what's present. Face it, accept it, and then figure out how you can move with it to get to where you want to go and eliminate force. Like that to me, I believe if I was to summarize my superpower as an entrepreneur and a leader, and maybe the thing that I notice is potentially different about my style compared to a lot of others that potentially suffer more in that seat. It's that I've had to learn to be really agile, and I think when you have a vision and you're fixed on the vision, and this was the lessons anorexia gave to me, right? Like I had this vision of how I had to look, what I had to achieve. And I had to learn the very, very hard way that I went through very real daily or hourly, minute by minute suffering of starvation. And when I finally got there, I had nothing. I went through all of that suffering just to be told if you don't start to gain weight again, you're going to die, which was so different to what I had in my head. And so um, the dark side of having a tunnel vision is you're never open to actually seeing what's really there, and simultaneously you need to be able to do that as well as hold this vision for a better future. But if you're holding a vision for a better future and you're sacrificing what's here now, or you're rejecting what's here now, it's really no way to live. It's a very sacrificial, punishing way to live because you never arrive. You never ever ever get there. And
Yeah.
it's the same for someone that's suffering with mental illness or maybe a health complication. It's such a paradox because when you're not well, all you want to be is well. Just imagine, it's a horrible thing to imagine, I know, but imagine you never got well. How could you find peace and happiness where you are? And the paradox is, if you can, you're cultivating in real time the very thing that's going to heal you. And that's what leads you towards wellness, but when we're always looking outward, and it's the toughest lesson. It's the toughest lesson to learn, but it's the most powerful lesson to learn. And I do my best to lead that way, and I do my best to bring others into an environment where they're also not sacrificing now for what we're creating. And that's often the feedback, that I get from the closest people in my team is have come from environments where they're super gifted and super talented, but they felt exploited. And so my job, I see my job as that I'm there to listen as much as I am to build a bridge with them and figure out how we can do both. And if we've got to slow this down in order for that to be balanced, then let's make those decisions as we go, and to not have that sort of mentality, which me of all people, that doesn't come naturally to me. Like, I'm very focused individual. I know what I want. So assessing things in the present as I go, I've had to learn that patience. I've really had to learn that patience, and I'm still learning that patience. And if you ask people that worked for me, even 3 years ago, they'd probably have terrible things to say about about me in that way. I've continually had to learn how to be more of that.
Patience is a hard one. It's
Mm.
really hard, especially when you have a powerful vision and you've seen it and you're just like, I need to bring this into reality now.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that. And I
Mm.
know on my entrepreneurial journey, again, I guess this was kind of like this comparison thing, but it wasn't when I started out. But I guess it was kind of in the middle of my journey. And I was working for Mind Valley overseas there in Malaysia. And I was very much immersed in the startup culture that was at the time just about grinding and hustling, like, just intensely, that whole, like, everything that was happening in Silicon Valley at that time, because this was like 2014 to 2016. And I know things have shifted a little bit more where people are talking more about like work-life balance and that sort of thing, but it was not that at that point. And so I was kind of thrown into that culture because Mind Valley had adopted it at that time. I don't think they do that anymore from what I've heard, but it was very much that. But I was also kind of that person as well. Like, I was always like a hustler, right? Like, I was always working. And I remember at that point, I was working at Mind Valley. I had another startup that I had co-founded there. And I'm just grinding till, 1, 2 in the morning sometimes, and getting to the point of just like crawling into bed. And yeah, so you have like these big dreams and you're so focused and you want to get it done. And you see, again, you're seeing all of these other businesses that seemingly take off so quickly, you think, right? And have this level of success. And when you're not seeing it manifesting as quickly as you want, it can be challenging for sure. So there's a spiritual practice in entrepreneurship. I think I had this conversation with the founder of the Shift Network, who was just recently on the podcast, and he was that's what he said, and I was like, oh, 100%, 100%. That is such a deep spiritual practice in entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah, I could not agree more than that. Like, definitely, in many different philosophies, that they'll talk about different ways of connecting to God or connecting to the divine, and devotionality, I know, is definitely my path, and
Mm-hmm.
my biggest expression of that is my vision.
Yeah.
To, no matter what, consistently be devotional. Part of devotion is listening to what it requires of you, not just forcing it to be, but actually having that be a two-way. There's a level of obedience, and that word is like very, I think, provocative for a lot of people who want to be self-starters and hustle and make it happen, but actually, like, I suffocate my vision if I don't listen to it. It's its own living organism that's needing me to be a servant to it, not the other way around. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so when you realize that, if you have a big vision, and I think that's the relationship, that's the orientation that has to occur. If you have a vision that's beyond just you, if you have a vision for the world, you've got to surrender it over to an intelligence that's beyond you, because you can't. We, as one person, can change the world, but the way one person changes the world, I believe, is by surrendering to something much bigger than just them. And, yeah, I think in this culture of individualism, that really gets lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this leads up perfectly to my next question, which will probably be my last as we're getting to the end of our time together. Um, but your vision, right? Like this civilization of love by 2030. Why don't you talk about that a little bit more, and like what you guys do at Love Out Loud, how you work with people, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, it's my favorite topic. Um, so I guess the first thing to understand about Love Out Loud is it was a philosophy that came from deep observation, working with people. I had different companies that I had started and run, mostly in the nonprofit space before I started Love Out Loud. I was also a commissioner in the Australian government for 4 years, which was really kind of interesting contrast because a lot of my work in the nonprofit space was working directly with communities. And so it was the work with those communities and the success I had achieved in those communities that then led to being an ally within government to help them understand how to approach mental health differently. So it was a very broad spectrum of experiences, and with that came deep observation and a lot of listening to what was really there for people. And what I really started to see was it didn't matter if I was speaking to the Prime Minister or if I was speaking to the worker in a rural community. If you could get past the superficial and actually hear them, they were all wanting the same thing, and everyone just wants to be seen and heard. And so I had this at the time, what felt like a huge epiphany where I was like, oh my God, like the system, it's nothing to do with the system. It's how people show up within the system. It's how people are treating each other day to day, which sounds so obvious, but it's so missed in these conversations. You work at that level of government, everyone's wanting to find, the solution, the program that's going to fix mental health, the drug that's going to fix mental health. And no, like that's not life. You know what that is human beings trying to take a very complex thing that is life and make it really, really, really simple. And in the process of that, we lose all of the nuance. We lose the natural process of change and evolution, full circle. And I saw that being done to such a degree that there were so many gaps because none of that grey was accounted for. Everyone was trying to find that box. And it was seeing that and seeing that the biggest transformation I ever saw occur in communities when I had the privilege of working with those communities was when I was the most present. It was when I said, you know what, I'm not just going to write, a program for the council to attempt at rolling out into the school there. I'm actually going to go and live in the community for a month. I'm going to be there. I'm going to listen. I'm going to care. I'm going to show up. Like that's when the change happens, and that's always true. There's a spiritual law called the law of value, and it's value is a direct result of the energy and intent put into something. And I think you can't create huge value without the intent, and the willingness to show up for that. It's just energetically doesn't make sense. But simultaneously, if you've become masterful at something, you might be able to give $1 million of value in a minute. But there's all of those decades worth of refining and thinking that's put you in a position where that truly is integrous as an exchange. And so seeing that, I realized I could support advocacy in this way, for the next 30 years. But ultimately, it's the wrong race. What I saw as the right race is what truly touches people, what truly intrinsically inspires people to be different. And the answer when I started asking that question was so simple. It's love. When someone truly finds love inside themselves. And naturally at that time, I started to look, who are the people, the leaders, the prophets, the gurus that are teaching this, and how accessible is it? How much do we really understand love in our society? It's really arguably not very well, because the ideas of love have been given to us by Disney, and by Hollywood. It's very one-dimensional, and it's not accessible to understand that love is a skill set that we can cultivate and develop, and it's an action we can take, and it's a strategy in leadership, and it's a strategy in life. And so it's seeing that inspired me to write Love Out Loud first and foremost, and get that philosophy really clear. And then it was an incredibly beautiful journey to watch it grow into a movement, and to see that something so simple, like the philosophy itself, is very simple. That there's this love inside of you, and first you need to discover it. And when you discover it, the rest of the journey is learning how to express that without limitation, to be able to love out loud. And when you learn how to do that, and part of that journey is to heal all of the wounds and traumas that are standing in the way of you being able to freely express love to yourself and to the world. And just like the innocence of a child, it's there you find true liberation. And I think that's where you're on purpose, because how could you not be on purpose if that's where you're coming from inside of yourself? It's a very pure place to be. There's no agenda, there's no motive, and that's freedom when you're not needing to cover anything up. And yeah, in seeing the powerful application of that philosophy in people's lives, like serious transformation, like people really leaving their jobs, and big changes that I think many modalities that I'd seen people work with, there's a lot of revisiting the same thing again and again and again, and it's not compelling people to actually take action. And that's where my passion is what is the breakthrough, what's the reframe that really allows people to do things differently in their life, to get more comfortable with change. And I think the power of love does. It's only the power of love, really, a lot of the time when the fear is so great. And it was this living organism that continued to build on itself. And it really is, I'm its servant, truly. That's how I feel. But because the philosophy was so clear, and I guess there was this power in it being a people's movement, that there were so many different versions of Love Out Loud that exist in every human and their expression of it. The team and I started to see just how much we could use this as a methodology behind so much of the new world that we want to design. What would it look like if all of our systems were built on these foundations and this understanding? And then you start to see why society is where it's at, because the foundations of where so many of our systems have been built, whether it be education or health or politics, it's rotten to the core, quite literally. It's not pure. And so we can make all of these superficial changes, but it's just like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not true change. And we're solving big problems, like the civilization of love to us, in its highest expression, is a non-local civilization, quite literally, that has its own health systems and education systems, and you can be a citizen and you can trade economically, but it's not money. It's integrity and attention and compassion and alignment and love as the currency. And so within that, there's a lot of architecting and infrastructure that we're constantly growing and building. One of the things I'm most excited for is the tech that we're developing at the moment, which will have the ability to measure alignment to belief systems through
What?
Yeah.
Wow. How does that work?
So using different biosignals, so the way the body, different parts of the body and the mind respond, that can basically be transformed into a coherence score with certain belief systems, and then helping the individual clear blocks that are in the way of alignment. So obviously on an individual level, that's amazing. But imagine on a collective level, say there was something crazy that was announced, like a nuclear war tomorrow, but being able to have a technology that can send a push notification out to 500 million people around the world and say, hey, would you like to become congruent to the belief I live in a peaceful world? And through the power of the collective subconscious mind, actually create enough momentum towards the eradication of that timeline through no external force, just through internal alignment at a significant enough scale. And so that's my deepest passion. I think technology is definitely the way to do it, but I think the way we think about technology is so, I mean, I could do 3 podcasts just on that. Technology is a system, it's not hardware, it's a system. And when we start to think about technology like that, then we get to really examine, the ethics of that system and the foundations of that system. And that's a big part of my passion as a systems thinker and a design thinker, but also this deep part of me that's philosophical and poetic, to be able to bridge those things, which I think in building any world, any civilization, it's the combination of all of those types of thinking that bring it to life. So yeah, I love it. I can't get enough of what we do day to day.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea that it was going in that direction. That is fascinating and so so inspiring. I love your vision. It's so beautiful. And so for people to connect with you, so you have courses and things. Are you guys doing live events again? Are you getting back into that now?
We are actually, yeah. So please check out our socials and our site. So we're going to be launching a few new intakes really soon in the next couple of weeks.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is the best way for people to connect with you and follow your journey, like get notified when this tech comes out, all of that good jazz?
For the tech, you can visit intruth, one word, .io. InTruth Technology is the tech arm of Love Out Loud. And for me, just follow me on any platform really, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, probably Insta for your listeners, or LinkedIn. Everything's Nicole Gibson except Instagram, which is Nick Gibson, NIC Gibson. Or you can go to my website, nicolegibson.com. Yeah, please connect. I also love when I do a podcast. I love hearing what you guys, took from it. And so please don't hesitate to reach out and have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free, for anybody listening to, if this podcast resonated with you, take a screenshot, share it, tag myself, Nicole. Yeah, tag us. Let us know what you thought. All right. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Again, you're just such an inspiration. I'm so happy to know you and to get to connect with you again and watch you on this amazing journey that you're on.
Likewise, my friend. Congratulations on your podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing your time and energy with us today. We'd love to hear your feedback on how our podcast has impacted your life, and are also open to suggestions for new and interesting topics. Please leave your comments with a quick review to help us grow this magical community of wellness warriors and light workers. Every month, we select one lucky reviewer to win our big magic box containing all 3 of our beautiful magic lattes. To connect with us further, check us out on Instagram at wild_remedies. Thank you again, and see you at the next episode.